When the power went out, no one thought it would last. An hour, maybe two. That's how it usually goes. But this time, it didn't come back. By the end of the first day, water systems stopped working. Freezers started warming up. Fuel pumps went silent. And by day 3, people weren't waiting anymore. They were scrambling, trying to keep things running with nothing to run them on, except for one place. At the edge of town, his lights were still on. His systems were still working. And the same people who used to laugh at his setup started showing up at his gate, asking one question: how are you still running? His name was Dale Mercer, 54, lived just outside town, far enough that people noticed what he was doing, but not enough to ignore it. A few years back, he started building something behind his barn. At first, it didn't look like much. A couple of old batteries, a small generator, some wiring that didn't quite match anything people were used to seeing. Then it grew. More batteries, panels mounted along the edge of his field, backup lines running into his house, his well, his storage. Piece by piece, he built a system that didn't depend on the grid. Not fully, not cleanly, but enough. Enough to keep things running if everything else stopped. From the road, it looked messy, like a mix of old equipment and half-finished ideas. Neighbors noticed. They always do. "What are you building back there?" "Looks like a science project. You planning for the end of the world or something?" Some laughed. Some shook their heads. "Power's reliable. Always has been. Why spend all that money on something you'll never use?" Even his brother said it. "You're overthinking this. Grid goes down, it's back in a few hours." Dale never argued. Didn't try to explain it. He just kept working, testing the system, running it for short periods, making adjustments. Because to him, it wasn't about expecting something to go wrong. It was about being ready, in case it did. And for years, that system sat there, unused, unnecessary, looking like something no one would ever need. For years, nothing happened. The power stayed on, just like it always had. Lights came on with a switch. Water pumps ran without interruption. Stores stayed stocked. Fuel flowed. Everything worked, because it always had. And every time it did, it made Dale's setup look a little more unnecessary, a little more excessive, a little more pointless. People joked about it. "You still running that thing back there? Must be nice wasting money on backup plans you don't need." Even when small outages happened, they didn't last. An hour, maybe 2. Long enough to be annoying, not long enough to matter. And when the lights came back on, everything went right back to normal. That was the pattern. Reliable, predictable, easy to trust. So no one really thought about it. Not seriously. Because when something works long enough, you stop thinking about what happens when it doesn't. And Dale? He kept doing the same thing. Running tests, checking connections, replacing parts before they failed. Not because anything was wrong, but because one day, it could be. Still, to everyone else, there was no reason for it, no urgency, no need. Because the system they relied on had never given them a reason not to. Until one afternoon, without warning, it did. At first, it didn't feel serious. The lights flickered, then went out. People waited, just like they always did. An hour passed, then 2. Phones came out, calls were made. Any update? Must be a line issue. Give it a little time. But the time kept passing, and nothing came back. By nightfall, the town was dark. Not quiet, not calm, just dark. The next morning, things started to shift. Water systems weren't running. Fuel stations couldn't pump. Refrigeration units started failing. And without power, everything slowed down. By the second day, people stopped waiting. They started adapting, running generators where they could, rationing what they had, trying to stretch things out until the grid came back. But it didn't. And the longer it stayed down, the more everything else started to break. Because what they depended on only worked when everything else did. And now, nothing was. By day 3, it wasn't just inconvenient. It was a problem. By day 5, it was something else. Something people hadn't planned for. That's when they started noticing it. Not all at once, just small things. A light on in the distance. Water still flowing somewhere it shouldn't. A hum where everything else was silent. And slowly, that attention shifted toward one place, Dale's, where nothing had stopped, where the system they had laughed at was still running, steady, uninterrupted, exactly the way it had been built to. The first person didn't knock, just pulled up, stepped out, and stood there for a moment, looking at the lights. Then he walked up to the door. Dale? Dale opened it, calm as ever. Yeah. The man hesitated, like he didn't quite know how to ask. You? Still got power? Dale glanced back toward the house, lights on, systems humming, then nodded. Enough! That word spread faster than anything else had. By the next morning, more people showed up. Not in a rush, not at first. Just one, then two, then a few more. Some brought containers. Some asked for water. Some just stood there, trying to understand what they were looking at. Because everything around them had stopped. And this hadn't. By day 4, it wasn't just neighbors. It was farmers, small business owners, people who needed something, anything, to keep going. A freezer powered long enough to save what was inside, a pump running just long enough to move water, a place to charge what they could. And every time, they asked the same question. How are you still running? Dale never gave a long answer. Didn't explain the whole system, didn't break it down. He just said, I planned for it. That was it. No lecture, no, I told you so. Just quiet preparation, doing exactly what it was meant to do, and standing there, watching one place stay alive. While everything else had gone still, there was only one thing left to understand. The system they trusted had worked, right up until the moment it didn't. And the one they laughed at had been ready the whole time. By the time the power finally came back, things didn't feel the same. The lights turned on, systems restarted. Everything went back to working the way it always had. But something had changed. Not the grid, not the equipment, the way people looked at it. Because for 9 days, they had seen what it looked like when it wasn't there, what stopped, what failed, what couldn't keep going on its own. And they had seen something else, too. One place that didn't depend on any of it. Dale's setup didn't get bigger after that. He didn't turn it into a business. Didn't start selling power. Didn't try to prove anything. He just kept it running the same way. Quiet, steady, ready. But the questions didn't stop. People came back, not to ask for help this time, but to understand. How did you build it? What would it take to do the same? Because once you've seen the difference, you don't forget it. You don't laugh at it the same way. You don't dismiss it as unnecessary. Not after you've needed it. And Dale? He never changed. What he said, he didn't talk about worst-case scenarios. Didn't try to convince anyone something bad was coming. He just told them what mattered. That it's easy to trust something, in fact, when it's always working. That it's easy to ignore what you don't need until the moment you do. And that being ready isn't about expecting things to fail. It's about making sure you can keep going when they do. Because when everything else stops, the only thing that matters is what still works.